Do family ties affect the work of Washington journalists? That's the question posed by Paul Farhi, whose Washington Post piece pointed out numerous connections to the Obama administration. ABC News President Ben Sherwood, whose sister is a national security advisor to President Obama. CBS News President David Rhodes, whose brother is a White House foreign policy advisor. And then there are the marriages. ABC's Claire Shipman, whose husband is White House spokesman Jay Carney, and NPR White House correspondent Ari Shapiro, married to a lawyer in the White House counsel's office. Paul Farhi, is this really cause for concern? In every case you wrote about, you had either journalists saying they'd recuse themselves from certain kinds of stories or changing assignments to deal with the perception of conflict.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a perception of conflict, but whether you can prove an actual conflict is really not obvious to me. And I really would like anybody who suggests otherwise to come forward with some kind of evidence to say, aha, you're pulling your punch, or you're not covering something, or you're favoring somebody because of a relationship. And it does not appear to be the case that that has happened. The only thing that critics can point to is the fact of the coincidence, the fact of the connection, rather than the actual work that was in some way changed to favor a relative.
Right. Lynn Sweet, is it fair to cast aspersions, for example, on the presidents of CBS News or ABC News because they happen to have siblings who work for the administration?
No, it's not fair to cast aspersions on that. We could find other things where it might be whatever their coverage policies
what
are.
What about marriages? So, for example, Farhi reports that the CNN Deputy Washington Bureau Chief Virginia Mosley overlapped for a couple of months with her husband's stint as Deputy Secretary of State. He stepped down earlier this year. Yeah. Are journalists supposed to give up their profession because a spouse has an independent career?
No, but it is hard, and certainly if we look at Capitol Hill, there's all kinds of relationships between reporters and staffers on there. I think you have to be very careful. I think you do have to disclose when you have relationships, maybe even a regular thing on the bottom of a story that says so-and-so's married or whatever, where you draw the line, or it's a sibling up, that would not hurt. On that.
One other issue before we go, President Obama dropping by an off-the-record briefing this week for White House reporters, and that caused some hand-wringing. Peter Baker of the New York Times saying if they had known in advance that the president was going to show up at this off-the-record session, maybe the Times wouldn't have attended. Paul Farhi, is this some ethical breach? I mean, presidents have talked to journalists off the record for a long time.
Yeah, and I wish it were on the record, and so do the reporters. The president dropping by, I don't really see a problem. It'd be nice to be able to get that information out to the public to know exactly what he said.
Right. Now, there was this flap about Eric Holder, the Attorney General, having those off-the-record media briefings at a time when he was under attack for going after reporters and their phone records and their emails. But what were the reporters supposed to do? They didn't know the president was coming. They're supposed to run out of the room. I wish he had more on-the-record briefings as well.
Right. So not all off-the-records are equal. Nobody knew that Obama was coming. You'd be crazy to run out of the room, and frankly, not to take that off-the-record, even with the chief of staff, just to get to know what's on his mind. Eric Holder, different story. He should have just met with bureau chiefs or the academics or whoever, or the news organizations, to make policy. Different than meeting with reporters who write about policy.
All right. Lynn Sweet and Paul Farhi, thanks very much for stopping by this Sunday morning.